Hello everyone, my name is Carolyn Walcott, and I will be your moderator for this special Women's Candidates Roundtable discussion, which is facilitated by the Women and Gender Equality Commission. The forum comprises of women candidates from the main political parties and a live studio audience. The panel will address questions from the audience and myself. Questions that will be discussed involve issues of interest to women and will provide candidates with an opportunity to present the position of their respective parties on the issues being raised. The Women's Candidates Roundtable is comprised of Ms. Gail Teixeira and Ms. Priya Manichan, representing the People's Progressive Party Civic, and Ms. Walda Lawrence, along with Ms. Cathy Hughes, representing a Partnership for National Unity, Alliance for Change. Welcome to the program, ladies. Let me begin with a question that is perhaps in many persons' minds, not just the women's issues we're addressing today. Despite the strides made by women in our society, there are a number of underlying factors that continue to impact the empowerment of women. What factors do you think should actually inspire women to vote on May 11?
Thank you very much for having us. I think it's an incredible forum where we can discuss issues that are relevant to women, and of course issues that are relevant to women are relevant to the entire country. So I just wanted to say thank you and to the organizers, the Women and Gender Equality Commission. It's an incredible idea. Women across the issue of women being not as empowered as they need to be is an issue that faces the entire world. It's a worldwide issue, and it really has its genesis in the imbalance between the genders. Men and women not being equal. So gender equality is this catchphrase that we use a lot and forget what it means. And that inequality really results in all the things that have become issues that are ripe for women to fight against, for women to attain. So domestic violence, economic empowerment, more women in politics. These are all issues that are being addressed now by the world, and Guyana of course, but it springs from the prevailing gender inequality. Why should women vote? Simply because you have to take care of yourself. If you want your family and your life and your children's lives and your partner's lives to be better, to be good, then you have to make decisions yourself. You can't rely on someone else to do that for you. And so it is as important for women as anybody else to vote. I don't know that we have stats though that suggest that women partake or participate in the elections in terms of voting less than men. I suppose Gail would know, but I don't know of any stats that suggest that women, in fact, I would like to think on the campaign trail when you're talking at meetings and so on, I see large numbers of women, and I think that would be true for all the parties. So I'm not sure that in Guyana we have a problem where women participate in the electoral process as far as voting goes. Less. That is a problem in other parts of the world, and we should not import it into Guyana, but it's not a problem for us as far as I know.
Mrs. Hughes?
I think it's important for women to vote because it really is a responsibility. At the end of the day, I feel strongly that unless you exercise that right, which gives you an opportunity to have a say in a specific political party that's going to bring policies, unless you get involved at a community level in the decision-making process, unless women across the board in Guyana, for example, start to increase their representation on state boards, in all kinds of organizations. If we don't do that, then we can't really shape where we want this country to go. And I think for too long we haven't, for several justifiable reasons, not been able to participate as well as we would want to. We've come a long way, but there's still a lot to do.
Thank you. Ms. Teixeira?
Well, I think that the road is never ending. As society evolves and changes, issues change, and women's issues also change contextually. So that I don't think that we will reach at some point in human development the end of all issues regarding human rights or women's rights. But I think that the issue of Guyana is a very special one that needs to be highlighted, in particular to do with women in Guyana. The struggle for universal adult suffrage and the lead up to the first free and fair, first elections under colonial government, where women and men could vote once they were under the age of 21, over the age of 21, and once they didn't have to any longer have to be able to read and write or to have property, which were the impediments, that women in Guyana historically, right across this country, have played a very active role in elections throughout the decades. And so women, you not only, as Priya said, at the rallies, but at the polling agents, the scrutineers, the persons who are involved in every facet of election preparation for our political parties. If it weren't for the women in our parties, I think that we would be not as strong as we are, whether we disagree ideologically or politically with each other. But women in this country have, I think, over the last 50 years, 60 years, have valued their right to vote, their right to express their opinion, their right to choose. And as Priya said, in other countries, this is a problem. We don't have that issue here. The issue, I think, and where the constitutional reform is important, is the requirement of 1/3 of the list for eligibility, a criteria for eligibility for political parties. The decision to do that, I think, was a very radical one, a progressive one. Obviously, one may want in the future to increase that to 50%. But the fact that the law was changed to require any political party wanting to contest elections to have 1/3 candidates, and it shows in Parliament, from the time that law is passed, the number of women in Parliament increased, although the law didn't require that, although you had 1/3 women on the list, you had to have 1/3 women in Parliament. The fact was that this has been a major achievement, where Guyana is ranked as, I think, 24th or 25th in the entire world for women in Parliament, and women in the cabinet, I think we're around the same thing, 24th, 25th. So these are major achievements for a developing country like us, and I think these are the issues that inspire women in our country, whether they, from whichever part of our quarters of our country, to come and make sure their name is on the list, make sure they come and exercise their right. And any polling station you check, and I guarantee you, any polling station you check on May the 11th, 6 o'clock in the morning, you will find women as some of the first people in line to vote. First people in line.
Thank you. Ms. Lawrence, why should women vote on May 11?
Well, first I would like to begin by just reminding all of us women here on the panel and out there that we know that behind every strong man, you know, every successful man, there's a strong woman. We are the bedrock of society. Our roles and functions are important not only to our families and our communities, but our country as a whole. And we all want to share in a better life. We want to ensure that we have the necessary care facilities available to us. We want to ensure that our offspring can grow up in a society where they're free from fear, where they feel secure in the environment, and also whereby they can be given equal pay for equal work. It has been too long in our country, Guyana, that despite all the strides we have made as women, that we still have women who are not being paid equally for work being done as their counterparts. And most of all, we are the caring and nurturing elements within our society. And therefore, we need to take that across, and we need to ensure that we place ourselves in positions whereby we can give representation and we can be involved in the formulation of policies and programs for the country, especially the economic policies.
I thank you all. I've heard submissions on the rise of women over the years here in Guyana. But if a woman who feels marginalized at this point were to say to you, I really am disenchanted about the process that is coming up on May 11th, what would you say to her? Is it in the process, in the pipelines for her, should she cast her vote on May 11th?
Empowerment, fully. As everybody just said in the response to the first question, it's important to participate in your own development, so someone else doesn't chart your course for you. And in the same way that if you want your house developed, you want it painted, you want it decorated with flower plants, you don't ask your neighbor to do it for you, you can't ask someone else to be responsible for your life. And so disenchanted, if you're disenchanted, then that is all the more reason, disenchanted I'm assuming with the process, that's all the more reason to go vote and put the party in power that you believe will listen to you and change this process. Any way you look at it, we have to be fully involved, although I do recognize as a right, and a part of a spin-off of the right to vote is the right not to vote. So while I would encourage everyone to vote and to participate in this decision-making process that our country is going to undertake on the 11th of May, I would also recognize the right not to participate in that process.
Mrs. Hughes.
I would say that if you're disenchanted and you sit and do nothing about it, you will stay where you are or probably get worse over time. And therefore, I would like to remind women that this is not a right that has been easily won. All across the world and in Guyana, women have struggled to get that right. And therefore I say, instead of sitting down and doing nothing, let's hear from you. Get up, get involved in the process, vote, let your voice be heard, speak up, determine and bring to the forefront what changes you would like to see. Go to your parliamentarians, go to your political parties. You have to advocate.
Thank you.
Well, I don't want to be repeat, but I think that one of the fundamental rights of choice is the right to vote for who you wish to run your country. And therefore, it is really the ultimate right and voice that people are given. In between the period of elections, people have a voice, they can speak to their parliamentarians, they can go to meetings, a range of things, but it is in the right to vote and that vote on election day that is the power of the electorate. It is the power that every political party, every political leader has to listen to. And so it is a very extraordinarily powerful tool. And therefore, for me, the right to vote is the ultimate in terms of your voice and your capacity as a citizen to choose. And if you're disenfranchised, you're dissatisfied with one, you give it to another. This is what the structures of government are built on. And so I think that for me it is a right I can't see people not wishing to exercise. I think it would be, and as people say, if you don't exercise it, you deserve what you get at the end. The empowerment issue is that you vote, you put your preference, and you live with the results. That's the most important issue, and that's the other part of the democratic right. You vote, but you live with the results, whether it is what you wanted or not. And that's an important issue for our country.
Thank you, Ms. Lawrence.
From time to time in our lives, we become disenchanted with one thing or the other. But I don't know that women are the type of people who just sit down. Women are go-getters. We change things. We bring about change. We are the leaders in our homes. We are not only the molders, but we also ensure that future generations, that we prepare things and put things in place for them. And this is the opportunity, not only for ourselves, but for our children, for our grandchildren, and for future generation. This is our opportunity. Personally, you have that right to go out there and to exercise. And I'm quite certain that the women in Guyana are looking towards exercising that franchise for a Partnership for National Unity and AFC, because they have seen that we have been able to put aside our differences, even our, the way we may feel about each other or issues, and put Guyana first. And so we're putting them first. That's why they will go out and vote.
Thank you, and noted. I'm back to Ms. Malik-Chan again on
And then I shouldn't be sitting where I'm sitting, right?
I'm sure you're all correctly placed.
Because it may look as if I'm trying to divide the unity that is this coalition.
I'm sure
that's
you're
been
all
created.
perfectly placed in
Not
this
at all.
setting.
You're wearing green, so don't worry. You're in good company.
Over the years, I'm sure you all agree with me that several legal and social interventions, rather, have been made to improve the lives of women in Guyana. But some argue that there's still much more room for improvement. And my question to the entire panel, and I'm going to start with Ms. Lawrence from this end here. If your party were to be elected, what would it do to further enhance or to further improve that, those issues or those interventions that were delivered in the past few years to enhance the lives of women in Guyana?
I think we have short-term goals and long-term goals. And one of the first things we're going to ensure that we do is to ensure that the family court is up and running. It has been too long in waiting for that. Secondly, we would like to address the issues where women, there are laws out there that give protection to women's issues, but our problem is implementation and denial of the justice that they deserve. Too lengthy a wait in order for matters to be tended to, and therefore a lot of frustration and so on builds up within our women. And those are the issues we are going to ensure that we clear those clogged channels, whereby a woman who goes out there, have an issue, she can ensure that her process goes right through to the end. And
Thank
that is some of the things we are going to begin with.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, there are a lot of issues where there are gaps and there are weaknesses. So we're 740,000 people in a country the size of the United Kingdom. And therefore we're challenged as a country to do with the resources and special skills, particularly in a number of the social issues that we confront, domestic violence and so on. And I think that certainly the areas that for me in terms of empowerment of women has to do with the continued greater participation of women in the economy as businesswomen, as farmers, as shop owners, as persons who run salons, who run schools. And in fact, the statistics show that 58% of the women that were surveyed with the gender gap, the World Economic Forum on gender gap, global gender gap, showed that Guyana had the highest level of women who have part ownership or ownership in businesses vis-a-vis Latin America and the Caribbean and any other lower middle income country. So this is a good trend because you're talking about empowerment. The issues we have to confront, and this is for political parties and for government, is that 29% of our households are headed by women. And until there is an issue of male responsibility, fatherhood, that women will never be able to reach their zenith, the heights of which they are capable of doing, because they are held back by the actual reality of running a home by themselves, taking care of children, taking care of dependents, taking care of grandparents and stuff like that. And so we have to look at a number of areas of greater daycare facilities, for example, in different parts of the country so that it will facilitate women going out to work. We have the feminization of the guard service, the private guard services. Many women have to leave their kids at night alone. How do we find after programs that will facilitate that and allow them to work in a less, worrying situation as a woman when you leave your children alone? These are gaps that we have to deal with. In the courts, the issue is the laws. I have found more and more that we still have, as women in political parties, the issue of ensuring that women are properly informed about the laws and how to use them. This is still a challenge. We can talk about government and opposition. The issue is that the women's organizations need to do greater work among women at the grassroots level, at different levels, to educate our people how to use these laws effectively. And then we have the issues of the judiciary. If we're going to talk about, we've made changes with domestic violence, and we have seen more increased persons being charged, brought before the courts and so on. But in sexual violence, we still have a low level of conviction rate in the courts. Part of the problem is the victims themselves withdraw because the court cases take 4 or 5 years, including pedophilia cases, some of them we know that are well publicized in this country. So the issue is, how do we try to ensure that the judiciary, the prosecutorial aspects are strengthened in order to make sure that justice is administered in a timely manner. And this doesn't go only for women, but for other cases as well. So I think that the constitutional legal framework of Guyana is good in terms of women's rights. It's the issue of being able to ensure that women know how to exercise their rights, where do they go to get help, how do they affect that, and also to ensure that the processes work well to address or redress their issues.
Thank you. Mrs. Hughes?
I think that really we need to look at transforming the way the society looks at women. We know that we're just about 50%, or I think slightly over 50% of the population. We know that we're involved in businesses at all levels. We know the majority of graduates from the University of Guyana, for example, are women, but yet it doesn't transcend into the decision-making levels of society. If you look at a lot of the private sector businesses, the women are there, yes, but they're not at the level they should be in terms of managerial opportunities. So I think some of the things we need to look at in terms of empowerment of women, in terms of business, we need to make sure that we have easier access to credit for them, more microcredit opportunities. I think Gail touched on the whole area of domestic violence, which is a real major problem. Unfortunately, almost every day we open the newspaper, there's some kind of abuse. There's women that have lost their lives to domestic violence. And yet the society doesn't seem to have worked on the institutions that can better equip women or assist them in this very important role they have to play, because they're nurturers, they're looking after the home, they're still income, they're required to be income bringers also. So things like ensuring that the daycare facilities are there, companies doing tax credits to companies that can actually start to, for example, if they have a room that they create and they have somebody that can look after a lot of the children. Think about it. From lunchtime, most women are worrying or looking at who is collecting their child from school at 12 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We can do things where our private sector are encouraged to participate more, you know? More daycare facilities at the police stations, empowering our police women to specifically play a role to help women. They must have a bias to make sure that if a woman comes into that police station, they're doing everything they can to make sure they're comfortable, that their concerns and their complaints are adequately looked at. We should probably have social workers at every police station. Those are some of the things.
Thank you, Ms. Manik-Chan.
Yeah. Look, I want to place this in a world context. It's sexy and political rhetoric to promise everything under the sun and say which party will do better. The reality is that right now, 3.8% of the world's development aid goes towards gender equality. 3.8, not even 5. This is a worldwide problem. All of these issues we're hearing, domestic violence, courts not hearing people, matters that are happening. This is what is happening across the world. And until we address this as a world, we're going to see countries struggling with attaining the benefits or achieving the benefits, enjoying the benefits that come with gender equality or greater gender equality. Now, you asked specifically, what are we going to do? It's very easy. And it's very easy to list off, oh, we're going to make the courts hear people's matters better. How are you going to do that? Tell us that, and that will be a plan that we can get behind. Because the courts have people that have suffered, and service providers in that court, that have suffered from the lack of this equality, that will see people passing these matters through the court quickly. The court suffers from the same attitudes that have us talking about this issue right now. And so we have to change that in the society. You asked specifically what our party will be doing, and I'll give you some concrete things. I'm not going to give you fluff. One, we are going to be reviewing all the laws that address women to see where there are gaps and loopholes. And I'm sure now that I'm telling you some of this, we'll see it copied elsewhere. But that would be good. Because, I mean, we set the trail. We blaze the trail and other people are putting it in theirs. But we're going to be reviewing every single law that address women. Now, that's very hard because every law addresses women. But there are some laws that women are more dependent on. And to see where there are gaps, where there are loopholes. We're going to be making sure some of the institutions that exist or that were envisioned under the various pieces of legislation actually happen. So under the 2010 Sex Offenses Act, we were going to have sexual assault referral centers. Now, what was this? This was a place where you could go to one place and give your complaint. The police is there, the social worker is there, the medical personnel is there. They're all there because one of the things the research said was preventing women from proceeding with this was because she had to go and repeat this traumatic experience, and it took days and it took a long time. In South Africa, it has been shown that once these centers were put in place, that they saw conviction rates rise tremendously. So this is something concrete, not a fluffy thing. We'll help you, we'll pass it through the court quicker. How are you going to do that? We have the plan. We are going to make sure the domestic violence fight has to start also from the community. Because this thing where you see people saying that we're seeing more and more reports in the papers, that's actually a success of the women's rights movement. It came long before me. I can't take credit for it. It is actually a success of the awareness programs that happen, because anybody who wants to be honest will tell you that their grandparents and their aunties and so on were victims of violence, domestic violence, and they didn't even know it was a crime. They didn't even know it was something they can complain about because it was normal. This was what you thought you get when you went into marriages, and it happened across the board. You know, black, Indian, rich, poor, country, rural, wherever it was, rural, urban, but we didn't know that at the time. So the fact that you're seeing more reports is actually because those awareness programs that were run were successful. How do we translate those reports into a reduction in? And that has to be a speedy process through the court, empowering women financially. Now, empowering women financially doesn't have to do with women alone. If your economy is stable, and ours has had a 9% growth throughout, positive growth for the last 9 years, then women will benefit from that. When you give women the ability to own their own homes through the provision of house lots, the provision of low credit. We used to have a time when to borrow from the bank was 30% interest. It's now 10%. Women can now own their own homes. When you provide the space for girls and women to graduate from school, providing that very foundation. In 95, 11% of our people, our children, were dropping, 11% of 30,000 children were dropping out of secondary school, general secondary school. In 2014, it's 2% of 70,000 children dropping out of general secondary school. More of our girls are getting educated, getting the foundation they need. This kind of growth takes time. It takes time, but we shouldn't beat up Guyana. Guyana has done well in a prevailing world environment where, like I said, a very small percentage of development aid goes directly to attaining gender equality. So
I hate to cut you, but we've got to take the audience, and I'm sure that much more of your take on the issue will come from the audience. I'm certainly going to do that. We're going to go to the audience at this point, and I'm sure they have some questions for the panelists. We're going to start with the first question.
Do you think there is need for a gender policy, considering there is already a national policy on women?
All right, so can we start with Minister Manik-Jan?
I think policies are always a good place to start. It's a roadmap for where you want to go, but policy is as good as it does. And so we have to make sure whatever policy is there actually gets implemented, and that we have the structures in place to implement it. A lot of times I see people importing all sorts of fancy things from different countries into ours that really cannot work here. So any policy that's yes, to answer you directly, I believe we should have a policy. It's a good place to start. I believe that policy should be, to arrive at what will be the contents of the policy, should have wide consultation so that we are sure we're addressing the needs of Guyanese. I think we should be very careful not to make the policy about women and gender, and more about gender and gender balances. In fact, part of the problem, and this is perpetuating part of the problem, this entire panel, is that we have women addressing women issues, and that's never going to work, because we need an entire society to address the issues of half of their population, which would be us. So, sorry, but this is part of us perpetuating that problem. We should have a gender policy, and it should have things in it that says something like, you know, men should be talking about these issues too. So yeah, we should.
Mrs. Hughes.
Vis-a-vis the women's policy, I think a gender policy is very, very important, because we need to reflect society. We need to ensure that all the different groups that formulate and create a Guyanese society can feel comfortable that their concerns can be addressed. And therefore, a gender policy would include the gays, the lesbians, the LGBTIs, of course, which is very, very important. And of course, men, the contributions that men have to bring to this entire discussion. So a gender policy is absolutely necessary. We can't just have a women's policy.
I think that the Women and Gender Equality Commission, by its name, it was deliberately in the Constitution, in the discussions in the constitutional reform period in 1999-2001, is that should this be a women commission, and it clearly came out in the Parliament that is a Women and Gender Equality Commission. So it recognizes special rights and affirmative action you had to take with women's rights, but it also recognized that gender equality was issue, and that in the societal context, the role of men as participants in a whole range of activities, the family, the economy, politics, etc. And so I think that the Women and Gender Equality Commission as a rights body can play an extremely important role in contributing to any development of a gender policy, just as a number of men's organizations, NGOs, and so on. I don't think this is a task only of a government, but I think that we have to look at male absenteeism, if you want to call it that. You have community meetings on a number of issues, PTA meetings. It's women and women and women and women. We miss our men. I mean, you know, we miss the men. They're not where they're supposed to be. And so a lot of the issues we have to take up as political parties, as the PVPC, is to try to engage men at the community level and the civil society bodies and so on, to be able to ensure that we address some of the concerns of men. And we must also, as women, not think that all the issues men have to do with us women. Men have their own issues, whether it's their own sexual and reproductive health issues, which are distinct from ours, their own issues of self-esteem, their own issue of, we're in a what you call a transitional situation on the role of the family globally, and the paradigm shifts between male and female relationships and power relations. We have to address those issues. And so I have become rather tired over the years of women talking to women. And so I think that we have to broaden the scope, and we have to, as women, also take in men into the debate and into the discussion in a very real way, and listen to some of their own, what you call, attitudes and old hang-ups on the role of women. And we've got to confront that in a different way. How we've been doing it, I think, has been good, but we've reached a kind of limit of the speed at which we can go if we don't change the manner in which we deal with the issue. So policy may be a mechanism to get to that, but a policy by itself is not going to be the total answer.
Was put to the National Assembly, and we debated it. But at that time, we did look at the percentage in terms of all the various areas in which there existed inequalities as women against men. And it is time for us to review that. Where are we as a nation? And in order for us to put on board a new map, we have to ensure that we also take in what conditions exist now in terms of gender. Having done so, then we will be able to formulate a policy to take Guyana forward, a policy which encapsulates both men and women. And so, yes, I think that we should have a broad-based gender equality.
Thank you.
Policy.
I believe there's a second question.
What will your organization do to give more support to the Women and Gender Equality Commission to fulfill its mandate?
We're going to begin with Ms. Lawrence, and we're going to come right to around.
Thank you. If my memory serves me correctly, that when we passed that piece of legislation, one of the overarching body under which not only the Women and Gender Equality Commission, but the Rights of the Child, the Ethnic Relations Commission, and so on, Indigenous Commission, should have fall under the umbrella of the Human Rights Commission. That commission is not in existence, and I believe that the crafters of the piece of legislation would have envisioned that having the human rights as the umbrella where the chairpersons of each of the other commissions sit on, that there would have been a collective discussion and formulation of the programs of these various commissions. That not being in place, I think the Women and Gender Commission has suffered financially. They have suffered in terms of being equipped with the relevant skills and so on to exercise their programs. And so I believe that our government will ensure that we have the Human Rights Commission, that important element in those lists of commissions in place, so that they will be able to have the proper feedback, proper finances available to ensure that all of those commissions function effectively, and they can thereby give to the legislation issues and data on which we ought to address in terms of our legislation and so on. I think it's a yardstick in which we can use, very important one.
My dear friend from APNU has forgotten something rather important, and that is the chairman of the Human Rights Commission is appointed from the leader of the opposition, submitting 6 names, and the president selects 1 name of the 6. We have gone through leader of the opposition, Mr. Corbyn, from 2003, and Mr. Granger from 2012. And despite, and I have the proof of all the letters sent requesting the names, because the Constitution says the chairman comes from the leader of the opposition giving 6 names, and that the chairpersons now of ERC, Women and Gender, IPC, and Rights to Child automatically, they make up the commission. So I'm very disappointed, my friend, saying when they get into government, then the man will be, a person will be named, because it means that if they don't get into government, then we're never going to have a Human Rights Commission, because they've held up from 2003 to 2015.
But Gail,
so,
you'll be in
but
the
anyway, my dear friend,
so you will submit the names.
no, we lead to you. But the issue is that this is where, so that point I must respond to, because I think that each commission has their own mandate by the Constitution. The Women and Gender Equality has a mandate that's very specific. The Human Rights Commission is the umbrella body that deals with the Secretariat of co-sharing of what are the pools where there's overlap between the commissions. Certainly I can hear, and I see members of the commission here in the audience, they need more money. Who doesn't need more money? But the issue is that we also need the Women and Gender Commission, as with all the rights commissions, to do some very important things. They're an independent body. They're impartial, they're independent. Government isn't supposed to be interfering with them, nor opposition, by the way. However, the issue is that people need to, the constitutional commissions were set up specifically to allow for redress, complaints mechanism and redress, so that the commissions must set up protocols, how they deal with reports, how they investigate. So the investigative arms of the commission need to be strengthened. Their legal arms have to be strengthened, and a range of things, until they're able to put up those requests in structural, programmatical ways. Then there are going to sometimes be questions about finances. But clearly the commissions have been around long enough now that they should have hotlines. They should have websites that people can go into and interact and say, I'm a victim, where do I go, what do I do? So that they are an important arm of women's rights in this country, and they must also allow that if boys or males or persons have complaints to do with gender issues, that there's an open door policy. I'm not saying they don't have, but that I think it is time now after, 2009, because it took us a long time in Parliament to abide by the constitutional requirements to set up the Women and Gender Equality Commission, but that it is now time, 2009 to now, that I think now they can graduate to the next point. Finances, yes, but also they need now specialized skills. They need to now setting up their departmental structures and using technology and a range of things to allow people to come forward and to properly deal with a complaints mechanism where there's redress. And the Constitution empowers that commission to do that. Government doesn't have to change one piece of law right now to do with the Commission on Gender Equality Commission.
Thank you. We're going to hear quickly from Mrs. Hughes, followed by Ms. Manik Chan.
I think that I compliment the commission. I know quite a few of the commissioners. I think they're doing as best a job as they could do with their resources. So I don't want to spend too much time on echoing the importance of finance, but I think one of the areas is definitely ensuring that you have your own researcher, your own research department within the commission. A lot of the issues we're talking about, as Priya herself mentioned, we don't have access to those statistics. So we have an issue where we do not have the statistics from the census, for example. I posed the question about unemployment statistics. We're talking about women, but we really don't know whether they're underemployed, unemployed, don't want to be employed, or whatever. That's one aspect. I know the structure, and here I'm going to get into trouble, but I feel I must say it. I know the structure talks about independence of the commission, but I certainly do feel, and I'm basing this on some of the public statements and issues that I've seen the commission comment on. So recently I was very happy to see a very stern statement on the comments by our Attorney General. But we've had situations where we had a former police commissioner who got into what the British would call a spot of trouble. And again, on that occasion, I did not see a comment. There were a couple other occasions where great injustices that have to deal with women in our society, and we don't hear a comment. So my assumption as a bystander, as a member of the public, the perception is created that possibly the political interference is possible. And therefore I say that I would like to see maybe mechanisms that ensure that there's less possibility of political interference. I'm not saying that there is, I'm just giving you my perspective from where I'm sitting and from what I see. I think those are the main things. I know we're running out of time, so I will leave it at that.
We are.
No, we can't be running out of time because I need to answer this. The commission needs to be a bipartisan commission. I feel that for the most part they have been, but as disappointed as Kathy says she was with some of the statements, or as happy as she said she was with the statement they made recently, I was disappointed that they did not make some statements recently. So the police commissioner, what did he do? He was accused, it was alleged, and so I use all the right words, the former police commissioner, of rape, and then went to the court to got that investigation and so on blocked. And they didn't say anything. And then recently, the Speaker of the House was accused of rape also. And the commission didn't say anything either. He went to the court and he got an injunction stopping the child from publicizing this. And the commission didn't say anything. That was, in my view, if they weren't going to say anything about the former commissioner of police, they can't say anything about the speaker. So you can't call for them to say something about former commissioner of police, but you don't want them to talk about the speaker. I was disappointed, and I remain disappointed, that the commission does not speak on the delayed charges. When C.N. Sharma, who's very close to you now, was fainting away at the court step every time his matter called for rape of, alleged of course, because he's defending it, he said he hasn't done it, for several children. Repeated complaints. They said nothing. So it has to be a bipartisan commission, stepping out when the Attorney General says something, but failing to say something when the Speaker of the House, who's from a different party, does something that is harmful to women and children and women's children, does not give the impression of bipartisanship. It has to be across the board. I'd like to see the commission, I mean, everything requires money, everything. Your house wants more money to paint back a wall or to fix a toilet or something. Everybody is going to need, every organization is going to need more money. I'd like to see some more structures put into the commission. You asked specifically what would my organization do, and I'm assuming you mean my political party, because although we were told just before the program that this is not going to be about elections, every single question has been about elections. That's not cool. I mean, information would have been good. I don't know that we should have been told one thing and we're doing something else, but we're happy to answer. The PPP Civic, brought in the Women and Gender Equality Commission. It was under this government that this commission was put into the Constitution, of course, with support from the opposition. It was under this government that this commission was built, that this commission is functioning. So I think you see a record, a commitment from this party that this is something we want to see built, this is something we want to see work. And judging from that record, you can be sure that whatever the country's resources would allow, that the commission will get what they ask for. I'm not sure that we have an application at the level of the cabinet or at the level of the parliament for more funding that they have not seen.
No.
I mean, look, at the Ministry of Education, we say we want to build 10 schools. The economy can only allow 3. We get 3. So outside of the limits that the entire pie, the entire economy would allow, I'm not sure that the question seemed to suggest that there was some request that was not being answered, and I'd be careful, a little bit careful about that. I think they've done great work so far, but you know, we have to be careful in a small society that we maintain or establish a bipartisan committee. You could be partisan when you go out of the door of the meeting of this thing, but it's the commission.
It's the commission that's to be impartial, not the members.
All right, I believe we have time for 2 more quick questions. I'd just like to remind our panelists that we should strive as much as possible to answer within perhaps a minute and a half in the interest of time. And I know that's going to be very difficult for you guys.
You're talking to politicians. It's
I know.
not to do that we're women politicians. We are politicians, number one.
Next question, please.
Hello, panel. I'm a commissioner, and I wanted to share some information. We do have a website. We also are on Facebook. Our website address is www.wgec.gy. My question to you is: are you satisfied with the available data on women in Guyana? And if not, what would be your recommendation to improve the manner in which the data is collected currently? Everybody is free to answer the question, but I'm particularly interested in Mr. Shearer's response.
Well, obviously, I love data and I love statistics. So, and I always believe that there's more that we need to collect. The issue, though, Renata, is that as a country, we have to determine what is it we're collecting, and what are the fields that we're collecting, and how are we using them. And so, when we look at the MDGs and the assessment of the completion, and we're going to the end of 2015, there's data that's collected to do with gender equity, to do with children in school, and the malnutrition, and nutrition, and poverty reduction, and water, and housing, and environment. So lots of data on that. And also, in each sector, there's data collection, whether it's education, health, and so on. What I think we have to determine is that there's an awful lot of data that is collected that's not used, because the perimeter field may be in education. We're looking for, I'm just extrapolating, I may be wrong, to do with, we need data on how the kids are passing at CXE or your national assessments and stuff like that. But there may be a whole range of other data that's not touched. Clearly, the issue of data collection in Guyana is a constant process that based on capacity, based on connectivity, because if we want to be able to collect data, we're talking about collecting from across Guyana. In the old days in the Ministry of Health, when I was minister, and we introduced the epidemiological center, which was set up in '93, the first laptops we ever got, because we had to send out people to each village to manually take down the health records of how many kids were vaccinated, gender, age, and stuff like that. I remember in '95, the first laptop being sent into a community was, this was, you know, like rocket science. So that one is the issue of making sure there's connectivity and we're able to collect in a timely manner. Secondly, to analyze, retrieve, and etc. But also determine what is some of the data fields that, say, Women and Gender Equality Commission is interested in accessing. And I think that's where the debate is. There are areas, obviously, where we're not collecting certain data, or the data may not be used. For example, in a number of the treaty obligations, they ask us for the ethnic breakdown of children in our schools. Ethnic, socioeconomic, income status, for example. We don't collect in the school system, you know, the issue of what is the socioeconomic data of the children who come into the, say, the government schools. in the public service, the issue of collection of ethnic data is not collected. The only places where ethnic data is collected is the police and health, basically those two areas. So that we have to make some policy issues in Guyana. Do we wish to collect ethnic data in a variety of areas, which we don't do now? Should this be a policy or not? And until we do that, should we have in school? So when, Renata, someone may want to know what is the socioeconomic status of children in the government primary schools, etc., and the disparities or whatever it may exist by region, we don't collect it. So those are issues. We can't just talk generally about statistics. We got to be a little more particular in what we're looking for. The issue, though, is that the data we do have shows some really interesting things. And so even the La Pop survey that has come out shows life satisfaction, shows a range of issues that are very positive for this little country of ours. And I think that this is an ongoing process in the Women and Gender Equality Commission, and by the way, last lick, University of Guyana. That's your main area of academic research. I forgot that main important thing. The University of Guyana has to be the place where a lot of this research goes in. Well,
30 seconds for each person left on the panel now.
The IRA is paying. They can pay for an extension.
Go right ahead, Mrs. Hughes. Go right ahead.
You know, if we are collecting the data, part of the problem is that it's not easily accessible to a range of organizations.
It's retrievable. The issue is retrievable.
Yeah. It is sad that a lot of data on Guyana we get from the UN websites, we get from international agencies. So I think we have to start changing that. And the census is the one broad base, the amount of information that you get from a census. And that's why I'm mentioning it again. In most countries, you can go online and you could see the census results and the breakdown. This is 2015. We still only have access to some of it. I know I'll give
Can I just correct correct you? This census is a CARICOM program. All the CARICOM countries. And Guyana, like the other CARICOM countries, are moving in a particular direction together. And that is why some of the data has not been concluded, etc., etc. So that it's not just...
Let's agree to disagree on that.
Well, let me go to Ms. Lawrence quickly, who's been sitting there patiently, so that she can get in her comments as well.
I think Patty has said it all.
Okay.
I just want to add that I don't think that we lack information. What we lack is that particular place where we can take the information and put it in data form, and most of all, make it available to the public. Do not give me an NDS report that tells me that this is the data on children who attend primary school or who do not attend school, because I don't know where it's coming from. I would like to be able to access that data from some concentrated division or department in the country.
Yeah, so let me just respond to one thing. I think we can do better with collecting data disaggregated, but I think that's something the country has to decide on because it requires resources. So I think we can do a little bit better on collecting data because data should inform what we do. As to whether data is accessible though, we have information, our entire digest. Let's take the Ministry of Education is on the World Wide Web. That's for free. That's for free. Anybody could go once they can be able to use it and click and get that data. The problem is people are lazy. They don't want to sit down and interpret the data. So they will spew a lot of things that the data refutes. And then when you say, well, here's what our percentages are, here's what our data is, they say, well, that wasn't accessible to us. And we'll say again, but it's there for free. Go and use it. They don't want to use it. We also have a Freedom and Access to Information Act. Ask the people who are complaining about getting data how many times they try to access information under that act. Laziness. Laziness. So putting the institutions in place would be only as good as they are. You have to use them.
Research committee.
Right?
All right, we have time for one more quick question, and I'm going to ask that one representative from each party responds to that particular question. The final question, please.
Is rather technical, but important. It relates to the Convention to Eliminate All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW. And the question to the candidates, will your organization or party follow up specifically with the signing on of Guyana to the optional protocol for women in CEDAW?
I would say that our party would have absolutely no objections to signing on. I think that that protocol talks about improving communications, individuals in countries being able to take concerns straight to the UN. Is that the same one?
The optional protocol says that because it's rights-based, that if a citizen's right, women's right, any vulnerable group's right is not fully, if access to justice, if access to justice is not found in the country's court, that country and that citizen has the option of taking it to the Inter-American Court of Justice, the International Court of Justice, and so forth.
I did say international agencies. I put it in terms of communication, but meaning that the option is there for citizens. And we want to promote transparency, and I think it will add to ensuring that citizens have a second stage of recourse to any kind of opportunity that infringes on their rights. So we would have no problem supporting that.
Guyana is a signatory to the International Civil and Political Rights Convention, and post-94, Guyana abided by the optional protocol in regards to people making direct representation under the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights. Part of those rights include women's rights, rights in relation to a range of issues that are fundamental rights, which incorporate many of the rights that are in the CEDAW. So Guyana, for any citizen of Guyana right now who feels that women's rights are being violated, and the courts and the Women and Gender Equality Commission and the government and everybody is not adhering, they can go at this point right now under that convention. On the optional protocol, Guyana continues to have active consideration of this, because at this point we are convinced, legally and by advice by the UN, that under the same rights, people can go directly to the convention and apply under the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, in relation to women's rights or any other rights, justice, torture, anything. You can go because that is the umbrella convention from which the rights of the child, the women and others are kind of branch off and become conventions in their own right. So the optional protocol continues to be under active consideration by the present government and the political party, but we are satisfied that there's nothing to prevent any citizen of Guyana right now going directly to the UN Human Rights Commission and under the International Convention on the Civil and Political Rights.
We hope you have enjoyed the Women's Candidate Roundtable on women's issues. Thank you to our guests for a very insightful discussion. Thank you as well to our studio audience and the Women and Gender Equality Commission for their work in facilitating this special program. Goodbye.